Detroit, Ford's birthplace. Red Bull's riskiest gamble. The RB22 sits under the lights, glossy, stunning, draped in retro colors that scream legacy. But underneath that paint job lives something no one's seen before. Red Bull's first homemade engine. Their first season without the architects who built an empire. Their first real test of whether confidence can replace experience. And in the middle of it all, Max Verstappen stays calm. But here's what most people miss. Calm isn't always reassurance. Sometimes, it's the most dangerous signal of all. Because when Formula One's greatest driver sounds this relaxed heading into the sport's most uncertain era, it's not because the future looks safe. It's because he's already made his calculations. And what he knows changes everything. Let's rewind to how he got here. For nearly 2 decades, Red Bull Racing thrived on one formula. Adrian Newey's genius paired with other people's engines. Renault, Honda, always customers. Always dependent. But 2026 rips that safety net away. New regulations. Radical power unit rules. And for the first time ever, Red Bull built their own engine. The Ford Red Bull powertrain's DM01, named after Dietrich Mateschitz, the man who believed when no one else did. Sounds inspiring, right? But here's the problem. Building a competitive Formula One power unit from scratch isn't romantic. History is brutal to those who try. Honda's 2015 return was a disaster. Renault struggled for years. Even Mercedes needed half a decade to perfect their hybrid dominance. Red Bull has one winter, one preseason test, one chance to prove this wasn't a catastrophic mistake. Because Max Verstappen has an exit clause. If Red Bull finishes outside the top 2 by the summer break, he walks. That's not a safety net, that's a ticking clock. But then something shifted. 12 months ago, the paddock was convinced Red Bull would arrive in Australia dead last. Humiliated. Instead, according to F1 journalist John Noble, Red Bull's internal messaging completely changed. They're not panicking anymore. They're talking about being competitive, cautiously optimistic, but competitive. While Mercedes are expected to lead under these new regulations, Red Bull no longer see themselves as outsiders. And that's when Max's calm started to make sense. Because here's what Red Bull isn't saying publicly. There are strong rumors that Red Bull and Mercedes independently discovered the same loophole in the 2026 engine regulations, specifically around compression ratios. If you're not an engineer, that sounds boring. But in Formula One, boring technical details win championships. Red Bull has been aggressively recruiting engineers from Honda and Mercedes, blending philosophies, building something new at Milton Keynes. This isn't Ford slapping a badge on someone else's work. This is a legitimate ground-up power unit program. At the Detroit launch, team principal Laurent Mekies told supporters to bear with them in the first few months, but promised they'd eventually get on top of it. That's not PR spin. That's honesty wrapped in confidence. But there's a darker layer beneath the surface. Because while Red Bull projects strength, the people who built that strength are gone. Helmut Marko out. Christian Horner, sidelined from key decisions. Rob Marshall, Jonathan Wheatley, scattered to rival teams. And yet Max Verstappen stayed. Not because he's loyal. Not because he's sentimental. Because he knows something we don't. Let's talk about what calm actually means in Max Verstappen's world. In a recent interview, Max said the dimensions of the car have changed, and it will take a bit of time to adjust. His tone wasn't worried. It wasn't defensive. It was matter of fact. Operational. Most drivers react to long-term uncertainty by stabilizing the narrative. They hint at options, speak about commitment, frame timelines publicly. But that creates mental load, constant perception management that drains energy needed for performance. Max does the opposite. His language stays neutral, stripped of performative elements. His focus narrows instead of expanding into legacy building or speculation. He refuses to sketch visions of what might come or how he wants to be remembered. This isn't avoidance. It's deliberate reduction. As Max himself said about the team's approach, we're in this together and we never give up. We take risk. Yes, but I like that. That single statement reveals everything. Max isn't staying calm despite the risk. He's calm because of how he processes risk. Uncertainty doesn't require a different response from him. It just requires execution. Former world champion Damon Hill made a crucial observation. If Red Bull were truly lost heading into these regulations, Verstappen would already be voicing frustration. Instead, He finished 2025 praising the team, lifting morale, speaking with PR. I'd about their fight back. That doesn't sound like a driver preparing an exit. That sounds like someone who believes in what's coming. But belief doesn't win races. Performance does. And here's the brutal reality Red Bull can't escape. Max just lost the 2025 championship to Lando Norris by 2 points. 2 points. And it wasn't his fault. It was the car's lack of competitiveness before the summer break. Max chose to stay, but that decision wasn't permanent. If the RB22 isn't competitive in 2026, those conversations with Mercedes and Aston Martin will come roaring back. Because Max's calm isn't blind faith, it's calculated patience with a built-in expiration date. Red Bull knows Ferrari is struggling with their new engine concept. They know Honda has battery concerns. They know Audi has already downplayed expectations for their first season. That means the 2026 grid might not be decided by who's fastest out of the gate. It'll be decided by who adapts fastest once racing starts. And that's exactly where Max thrives. Because while other drivers get emotionally busy managing perceptions and defending legacies, Max compresses his timeline to what can be executed now. As external chaos increases, his internal response simplifies. That's the pattern. And that's why disruption fails to stick with him. There's nothing for it to attach to. Pressure arrives and finds no friction. So here's how this could play out. Scenario 1. The DM01 works. Red Bull are competitive from race 1. Max stays for the long haul, and this Ford partnership becomes the foundation of a new dynasty. Scenario 2. The power unit struggles early, but Red Bull adapt fast. By mid-season, they're in the fight. Max stays patient. The championship battle intensifies, and 2027 becomes their real shot. Scenario 3. The engine isn't good enough. Red Bull falls outside the top 2 by summer. Max triggers his exit clause, and the entire F1 driver market explodes as Mercedes, Aston Martin, and Ferrari all make their move for the greatest driver of his generation. One of these will happen. We just don't know which one yet. Did Red Bull just quietly rebuild their strength in time for the biggest regulation change in modern F1 history? Or are we about to witness the beginning of the Max Verstappen transfer saga all over again? And maybe the biggest question of all, when the RB22 finally hits the track in Barcelona, will it prove Red Bull's confidence was justified? Or will it expose the one thing they can't afford to admit, that they needed the people they lost more than they ever wanted to believe? If you made it this far, you already know this season's not about who's fastest. It's about who survives when everything's on the line. So tell me, is Max's calm genius or denial? Is Red Bull's gamble desperation or destiny?